So I'm so excited to be here. In a way, this is my community. I grew up in this community, so I wanted to share with you. Really, it's actually just a story about growing old, but all the good things that can happen if you're patient. So this is really a story about patience. But I wanted to start with this picture, and really this presentation is for you guys. So I'm in here, I actually can't remember where, but I'm in this photo somewhere. So I think it was my second overseas trip ever from Australia, if you can't tell I'm Australian from my accent, was to Houston for the Space Generation Summit, as it was called then, and the World Space Congress and the IAC and COSPAR. So it was a big meeting of all of the space conferences. As an Australian, and I think many people from other countries can relate to this, that we didn't have a space agency when I was growing up. And we recently have one, which is great, and I'm so excited for that, but it took a long time for that to happen. And so I didn't really have a way to sort of get involved with the space industry. So finding the Space Generation Summit and on a whim, jumping on a plane and going, I think in the end they offered me a scholarship of like $50 a day. And I'm like, I can make that work. And so I jumped on a plane, came to Houston, and attended this group of people. Attended the conference with these 200 people here. And I remember when I showed up, I went to this, I think I was a day early, and so I was in the hotel, and ironically, there was another Australian who was also a day early, so we became friends. And I'm wandering around, and I find the organizer's room. So actually, it's funny, in 2002, I did not own a laptop yet. And so I walk into this room, and there's like 12 people on laptops, with their laptops open, doing stuff, and they were actually organizing the event, much like this one. And I was like, wow, this is the future. I want to be part of it. So fast forward a week later, they actually forgot that I was a delegate and thought I was one of the team members and nominated me to run the conference the following year. So that's pro tip number one of how to really get involved in things here is just, I think it's a famous quote from Woody Allen, 90% of success is just showing up. So I stumbled into that room one day and sort of my course was set there. So why was this event so important to me? Well, I was much like Alvin just shared, in love with the space shuttle. I'm very jealous of these guys who've got to, you meet Dan Intersect too, who got to fly on the shuttle, and I really wanted that experience. So as an Australian, I thought, well, there were two Australian astronauts that I could point to. They'd both become American citizens, one of them a dual citizen, one of them naturalized completely to being American, and they got transferred to NASA, and they got transferred to the shuttle program, and then ultimately they flew to space. So I'm like, that's the blueprint. So when I was 17, I went to the Australian Air Force Academy to the admissions to try and apply to be a fighter pilot, so then I could transfer ultimately to the US and follow this convoluted path to space. I found out I was colorblind. So my medical record was stamped permanently medically unfit for duty. And on that day I resolved that some way I would get myself to space. And I was going to figure it out, and this is what I did. So this conference was the path that led me there. While I was organizing one of the later events, 2004 in Vancouver, during October, it so happened on the weekend of Space Generation Congress that this event was happening. Anyone know what this is? Well, you were there, Tim, right? Yeah, so this is the qualifying flight of Spaceship One to win the X Prize. I actually took this photo on my vintage now 2004 Canon camera, Casio actually. But it's really cool because you can see the whole scene, right, as the moon and the White Knight carrier and Spaceship One. So this was kind of the moment where I got religion about the future of the space industry. So I'd only been involved for about 2 years. I'd flown every year to the conference. I guess that was the third in a row. And I was like, this is it. This is the path where people who have been disqualified or otherwise don't have access can go to space. And here's a photo of us hanging out there after the event. And you can see Bert Rutan from Scaled Composites up on the screen there doing a talk after the flight. That was a lot of fun, and this ended up becoming my space family. Another event which was very pivotal was organizing a conference in Japan. I actually volunteered. I convinced them that organizing a conference in Japan would be so difficult that I needed to spend an entire year there. And so I spent a year organizing the SGC 2005. This is the attendees from that year, and a lot of familiar faces for some of you in there. And then one of the things that I found this photo last night was soliciting At that time, multi-millionaires with bad hair for money. So this is a photo of Elon Musk holding the fundraising prospectus for our conference and trying to get money from him, which he did not do. But I just thought this was such an amazing photo that I found last night. I had to share it. And it's amazing how bad his hair is at the time. Also, I don't think he's ever worn a tie since then. After those events, an interesting thing happened, which was NASA Ames had a new center director, a gentleman named Brigadier General Pete Worden, many of whom you know. So Pete wanted to find some people from different walks of life to bring in different perspectives and help create some new programs. And so I was invited to actually work at NASA as a foreign national contractor, which was really an awesome opportunity. So we set about trying to, in the spirit of the X Prize photo that I showed you, trying to think about how we could transform space and what was another approach ultimately to lead to human exploration. And so we had this idea that if we started small with 1 kilogram, then 10 kilograms, then 100 kilograms, then 1,000 kilograms, then 10,000 kilograms, in just 5 easy steps, we'd be there, right? And so this was step 1, which was trying to reconceive what might make a low-cost spacecraft. And this is an early prototype that actually ended up on the cover of Make magazine, quite embarrassingly, of like basically a piece of junk. We called it a janky sat, but it has all of the pieces of the satellite other than the propulsion system. It actually had 3 axes pointing and attitude determination and control and computers. And it was made out of spare parts, and it cost about $300 or so to make. At that time, I had a manager who used to pull his phone out of his pocket, and I think it was a government-issued BlackBerry, not even a smartphone. He'd go, "My phone is smarter than your satellite." And his claim was that modern computing hardware was so good now that it outclassed all of the space-qualified hardware we were flying in space. And actually that's true. At the time, I was also working on another space mission that was flying a 1990s era power PC with like 44 megahertz clock speed or something, while this phone here, which we put in a vacuum chamber, had a 1 gigahertz processor. More memory, more, different things. So it's not radiation hardened, but it's, in terms of specs, it actually outperforms anything that was in space at that time. So we ultimately did a balloon testing campaign. This is a photo from a balloon where we tested the idea of a phone sat, where you can actually, if you look closely, there's a little silver line at the top inside that cube. That's actually the whole phone jammed in sideways. We flew the phone, screen and all, to kind of prove a point that you could, possibly do something really capable with this with the device in orbit. So we put 3 of them in orbit as free-flying satellites. And we got this picture, which it's an 8 megapixel phone picture from space. We wrote a little AI algorithm to pick the best picture. That was a bit of a fail. But it liked this one and it sent it down to us. And it looks chunky because we actually took each cell of this picture, chopped it up into a little 200-byte packet and sent it out over ham radio signal to ham radio operators all around the world who received packets and emailed them back to us. So every little square of different sizes, and if you look in the top right, you can see how small little squares are on the top right there. Each square was sent to us by someone who had received that packet via their own ham radio at home. So without even a ground station, we were able to execute a space mission with a $500 phone and a $75,000 launch. And so that was an $80,000 space mission. We had an 8 megapixel camera in space with a gigahertz processor, tons of storage, rate gyroscopes, magnetometers, radios, tons of computing resources, and the whole thing cost $75,000. So if you think about this, each of you have in your pocket more space superpower than the USSR had in 1957 when they launched Sputnik. This is Sputnik with a camera. So you could do this. And then like all good Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, we went and started a company in Cupertino, which was Planet Labs. So this is one of our engineers, Ben Howard, working on one of our motherboards. One of the problems with a garage startup is the leaves and dust blowing every night. It's not exactly a clean room, so I remember my first act every morning was sweeping the leaves out of the garage. And then we launched these spacecraft, which were called Doves. So Alvin mentioned seeing a satellite passing underneath him. This is a photo taken from the ISS by one of the astronauts out of the window of our satellites being deployed from the NanoRacks dispenser. And so that's actually Earth down there. I have another one, I guess I didn't include it, that actually has a shot of like farmland underneath the satellites. But it's kind of crazy. And this is the very first picture that we got from Planet. And I remember after we bricked the software on the satellite, we spent about 6 hours one night writing new firmware and uploading it to the satellite, and eventually after massive effort, the satellite woke up again, and we got the software back and were able to log in and downloaded this picture, and at about 4 in the morning I emailed it to my co-founder, Will Marshall, who was also a long-term Space Generation member. And he says that he woke up at about 6 in the morning, saw my email, looked at the photo and stayed in bed crying for about 2 hours because he was so moved by this picture that was sort of emblematic of the use cases of what we wanted to do with our satellites, which was to map the whole world every day. And if someone cut down a tree in this field, we now have 1,500 photographs of this exact location. We can see what's happened over the last 10 years with this photo, with these series of photos. So then suddenly, last year, something really crazy happened, which was the sort of renaissance or the coming of age of the commercial spaceflight industry. And so this is another member of this community, Sarisha Bandler, and her boss, Sir Richard, floating around in the VSS Unity early last year. And so this was like huge, sort of came out of nowhere, really, to be honest. And I ended up flying about 3 months later. If you'd asked me in January last year if I would go to space in 2021, I would have said no, because I had no idea this was going to happen. So I was sitting in Hawaii during the pandemic, working from home, and got a call in March, which was a very interesting call. This person's never called my phone before, and I recognized the number. And I knew who it was. So I, for the last 5 years, had been talking to both Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin about flying on their vehicles, A, because I really wanted to, and B, because I thought that I could help them with contextualizing why this was important, in particular with the messaging around, is this tourism or is this really the beginning of like a new wave of exploration for the human race, which is something I really firmly believe in. So I'd been giving them proposals for about the last 5 years, and I'd given Blue Origin a written proposal many times at conferences, and I was like, here's my proposal to be one of your astronauts. And they're like, thanks, Chris. Please join the mailing list. We told you before, join the mailing list. You'll find out the same day as everyone else. So for about 5 years, they told me that. And then in March, they actually called, which was really lovely, and said, hey, our founder, Jeff Bezos, is going to fly to space. Would you like to go next? And I said, hell yes. So this is me and my wonderful crewmates, Glenda Vries and William Shatner, and also not in this photo, but Audrey Powers, who's one of the senior leaders at Blue Origin, was with us as well. And so I just thought this was a really cool photo of the new Shepard vehicle behind us on the morning of the launch. And then that's Audrey. And I have an Uber driver named Jeff, who some of you might have seen in the news. He's sometimes a big deal in his day job. But this is us driving out to the launch site on the morning. This is...
Oh, Jesus. No description can equal this weightlessness.
This is nuts!
It is nuts, Audrey.
God. Oh, wow.
Holy hell.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I can't believe this.
So there were a lot of swear words edited out of that video. And then here's another shot. You should see my grin on my face.
Wow. I've never seen anything like this.
That was a little Lego man flying by there. So just wanted to show this some data, which I thought was very interesting. In 2001, Dennis Tito was the first space tourist to fly up to the space station. And Space Adventures flew one person almost every year from 2006. Well, that's not quite accurate, 1 or 2 a year in the sort of next 5 years. So then there was this big gap for about 10 years where nothing really happened. And then this was what 2021 ended up looking like, which is kind of crazy. And the size of the bubbles is the size of the crew that flew. So the small bubbles are 1, and the last one is a crew of 4, which was our flight. And so just zooming in on that, that's the number of people. I think there was 26 people who flew last year. I think another 6 from Blue Origin are going to fly next week, I think, or in a week or 2, in about 10 days. So this is really, if there's been an exponential graph, I think this is one. And so we really are in the era now where we all get to go. Everyone gets to go. And in fact, my flight was almost 27 years to the day from me applying to the Air Force. And I often wonder what would happen if I'd given up at one of those nice round numbers that humans like. Another invented concept is, lines, anniversaries. I'm like, I've really spent 10 years on this deep dream. It's time for me to go get a day job. Or, you know what, 15 years is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. Or at 25, if I'd given up at 25, I wouldn't have flown. So I just kept going, and it ultimately happened, and it completely surprised me and shocked me when it did happen. So with that, I just want to end with this picture of unity. This was William Shatner's idea that we have a moment of unity together in our capsule, and share this time with everyone. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing you all in space.